Okay, start a little earlier than usual at U of T. We usually go 10 minutes, but by the time we get through the introduction, and things will be ready to give you full time. Welcome, everyone. I'm really so happy to see so many people here, given that we only announced this event a week ago. Would have been long, not even. More than a week? You sure? Okay. My name is Phil Kondakopoulos. I'm Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Toronto at Scarborough, and also here at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, where I'm serving this year as Acting Director of the Harney Program in Ethnic Immigration and Pluralism Studies. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Nikos Marantzidis, Professor of Political Science in the Department of Balkan, Slavic, and Oriental Studies at the University of Macedonia in Thessaloniki. Professor Marantzidis is also elected visiting professor at the Department of International Studies at Charles University in Prague. Poor you, you have to go to Prague sometime. And at the University of Kerala. He's the author of many books, journal articles, and opinion pieces, including, most recently, Under Stalin's Shadow, A Global History of Greek Communism, which was published in 2023, this year, by Cornell University Press. I know, Nico, you spoke about the book yesterday at an event that my colleague and friend, Professor Sakis hosted at York University. And I'm sorry I couldn't attend, but today you'll speak on a different topic, perhaps one a little more contemporary, radical leftist parties in Europe, 1945 to 2023, from communism to a modern radical left. Yesterday I was giving a talk. It was are you here? Not here. I said, yeah. In my comments to the students, I said, Podemos and Syriza will be probably mentioned. They said, Syriza is a radical left party? Hey, Speaker, you have a point there. Over the past few weeks, that's up for discussion, but maybe we'll touch on that. At any rate, it's a panoramic tour of the European left, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. Professor Marantzidis' talk is possible because of the generous support of the Hellenic Studies Initiative and the Center for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies here at the Munk School, and as well as the Hellenic Heritage Foundation Chair in Modern Greek Studies there at York University, and the Graduate Diploma in European Studies at York University, and the Hellenic Canadian Academic Association of Ontario, of which Professor Gekas is also the head. You want to say a couple of words about the Hellenic Canadian Academic Association?
With pleasure. I should say also that we have two members of our council, Phil, but also John Simulidis, and it's an association that we have for over 30 years that is in Toronto and Ontario, and is committed to organizing social and academic events such as this one. And thanks again to Phil and the Munk School for hosting it.
So this is a very ill-disguised attempt to generate membership for our association. So I went from being a non-member to a member of the executive within an hour and a half, about a year and a half ago. So the room for progress in the ranks is unheard of in this association. And
we will only select.
Yeah, that's true. In any case, if you're we've got a constitution, it's a bit weird in places, so you have to be a Hellenic descent academic in Ontario, but now we, through constitutional reform spearheaded by Professor Simulidis, we do accept postdocs and graduate students. So I assume some of your graduate students, if you're interested in joining the HCAAO, strongly encourage you to do so. It doesn't cost much. Membership benefits are outstanding, and we do some really nice events, including a poetry and music night that we held in June or May. May, that was truly outstanding. Anyways, with that, Nico, about 45 to 50 minutes. It's followed by open discussion. I think it would be nice for Professor Marantzidis if you say who you are, whether you're a student or a professor or just a member of the interested public, to preface your question, and keep it brief because I have a sense that there'll be lots of questions today. It'd be great to hear them all. So with that, please join me in welcoming Professor Marantzidis to the Munk School and to the University of Toronto.
Thank you so much, Phil, for introducing me to this very interesting, I feeling discussion about radicalism, leftist radicalism in Europe. The idea of this presentation is due to Sakis Gegas when we discussed some months ago about my presence here in Toronto, which is my first time here, and I'm really glad to be with you today. So what is the idea of this presentation, of this discussion today, is to make a general overview of the situation of leftist radicalism in Europe from 1945 until today. I know that for political scientists like me, this is a huge period, and it's very difficult to control, if I could say, such a huge period. For historians, probably it's very small piece of time, but we could see, you see later that when we discuss about this period, that important changes on the structure, the character, the physiognomy of leftist radicalism happened in Europe during these days. So it was important for me to discuss what happened immediately after the end of the Second World War until the 70s, 80s, and later on discuss the second part and the changes happened after the fall of communism, the fall of Soviet Union, and how these events influenced, had an impact on the formation, the shaping of what we call modern leftist radicalism. So I go immediately to the core of my presentation. What we know that the end of Second World War is, of course, related with the electoral rise of communist parties in Europe. From minor players, communists in Europe became important part of the political system, the party systems of the countries, and this is related to four factors. First of all, the role of USSR in the war and the glorious image of Soviet Union created by, of course, the win against fascism. The second factor, the ideological radicalization and social polarization of European societies during the war, and we can discuss about it, and I don't want to insist a lot, but it is a factor which went many European societies to radical paths, to leftist radical paths. The third factor is related to what we have seen as collaboration of the old elites, bourgeoisie, of European societies with Nazism and fascism, and of course this collaboration had a negative impact on their image and the political influence immediately after the end of the war, and of course, last but not least, the role, the resistance and the primordial role of communism in the resistance fight against Axis. Here is a map. I don't know if it's clear contrasts with the electoral importance, the electoral situation of different communist parties in Western and Central Europe. The first figure, 20, for example, in Finland, the Communist Party, SKP, 23% in the elections in April 45. The party is second, is the main party of the opposition. The party was banned since 1918 due to the civil war. In Denmark, DKP, 12% on October 4th in the position. And in the last election, which means in the pre-war last elections, the party was only 2.4%. You can read this map, of course, because the main point of this map is exactly to see how important was this electoral rise of the communists after the Second World War. If I should insist on two countries, I would say the one is Czechoslovakia, of course. The party is first in the elections of April 46, 38%. And the second country is France, where the PCF took 28%. It's the first party of the French Republic immediately after the end of the war, which signaled how important was this party for the French political life for years. Now, if you want to have a picture, an idea, what happened immediately, the decades next, the 40s, we can say that for the next 30 years, the next 2-3 decades, we can say West European communist parties stabilized more or less, in the majority of the case, stabilized their electoral presence, and in some cases were able to form or to support some governments. In the majority of the cases they didn't, but they had an important role, a critical role in Western European political life. What we can see in the 70s is the first signs of a decline of the electoral force of those parties, particularly in Belgium, Denmark, and the Netherlands. But at the same time, because of the democratization process in South Europe, Greece, Portugal, and Spain, other communist parties entering the electoral arena with having an important electoral presence. Here is a table, a lot of numbers, but there is no other way to understand what really happened. The different communist parties, European communist parties, you can see that in some cases, like Belgium, we see this electoral decline. The party is around 3% in the 70s without very, very marginal position in Belgium electoral arena. On the contrary, the French party and the Italian Communist Party was quite strong parties, around 30%, the Italian party, PC, PCF around 20%. And it's the same about the SKP in Finland, less than 20%, but quite strong party. And during the 70s, you can see the appearance of new parties, the PSP in Portugal, around 15%. The case of the Greek parties, Kukwe, 9%, 9-10%, are the most characteristics, as also the Spanish party 10%. So in general, what we can say is that the reality, the political reality, the structure of the political system that we have seen immediately after the end of World War II is stabilized for 25, 30 years, at least for the Communist parties. So the Communist parties until the 70s present more or less a stable image and a stable role in the political scene, the political arena of the respective countries. However, in the early 80s, it's clear that it's clear that an electoral decline is more than obvious. We can say we see that there is a really electoral crisis that hit all the communist parties in Europe. Of course, not with the same force, not with the same power, but in general, it is a widespread crisis, electoral crisis. And here is another table with a lot of numbers. It's the same parties, and you can see that in the majority of the cases, the electoral fall of those parties is obvious. Even in the case of the PSB of Belgium, the parties from 3% fall to 0.9%, 1% in the 80s. For the other parties, it's more or less the same trend. I have no time to speak one by one for all these parties, but I think it's clear, with a few exceptions, the Greek one, which the Communist Party is during the 80s is stable. This is, of course, related with the fact that few years only of political legalized political life existed for the Communist Party of Greece. So this is the main reason that explains this stable electoral situation of this party. But for all the others, more or less, the trend is very clear, and it is the decline of those parties that we could say is the word that is fit to characterize what happened to these parties. There are 5 factors. If you see the literature, you can meet 5 categories of factors that are related to this electoral fall of the communists during the 70s and the 80s. The first factor is the social structure factor, the change in structure, social structure of European societies, the shrinking of the traditional industrial working class, which was constituting the electoral social base of post-war communist parties. So what we can see is that there is, for different authors and scholars, there is a relation between the reduce of the role of the traditional working class and the electoral fall of the communist parties. There is an example here is France, for example. In the 60s, the working class was around 40%, little less than 40%, and it was less than 30% in the late 80s. So this shrinking of the working class, French working class, is considered by scholars as the most important or an important factor for this situation of the Communist Party. it is important to say here, and it's a big debate, not only in France, but in France particularly, about the role of the immigrants in the political life, and particularly in the in the communist trade unions. In general, what we have seen during the 70s is more or less a distance between the immigrants and the Communist Party of France. There are different explanations on this. One is a kind of cultural gap between them and the communists, and also it could be a question of different agenda strategies, what the immigrants want, the first generation of immigrants and the second generation of immigrants, and why they have seen the Communist Party not as their party, which was different when we discuss about native French people during this period or before. So there are explanations also about the different, we can say, the different backgrounds of the immigrants, and of course the fact that the first generation didn't vote, played a role, didn't have the right to vote, it didn't play a role in this distance between them and the Communist Party. The second factor is the cultural factor. There is a huge literature created, particularly in the 90s, about the new trends that mark societies, European societies, after the end or toward the end of Cold War. Social mobility, individualistic culture, consumption society, all these terms were considered by some scholars as the main explanatory factors of this electoral decline, the communist electoral decline. Why? Because new generations, they say, did not share the same values, the same culture that was characterized or that characterized the previous generation, the generation of their parents. So this new generation has different cultural, we can say, different cultural orientations, and this created a lot of difficulties in the contacts with the communist parties. And there is a book that was discussed a lot, and probably some of you have read it, the book of Didier Ribon, Returning to Rennes. It's a book of 2010. Didier Ribon, he's a French philosopher, and he's a memoir book. He wrote about his life as a child and later on in a working class family, used to be communist and later on displaced in the extreme right Le Pen's party, Front National. And Ribon is trying to understand what happened to this working class culture and to this working class mentality, and how those people, this population, voting for many years for the communists, from one moment to the other, decided to move not to a socialist party or somewhere close to the communist tradition, but to the extreme right. So this is this trauma, we can say, is something that marked the debate in different places, and even today we discuss a lot about this in Europe, because it's not only the case of France, it's also the case of Meloni's Italy. We see the same trend in some cases. Meloni is very strong in the north of Italy. The north of Italy was the stronghold of the Communist Party of PC. So what happened? What happened? And we see this kind of wave coming from the communist left to the extreme right. It's a big debate. I don't want for them to enter in, but it is this cultural factor is considered by some scholars as an important factor, which explains this electoral decline we discussed. And the other factor, the third factor, is the political factor. And the political factor is changes that we see in the political arena, in the party systems in Europe in late 70s, early 80s, and these changes are related with the rise or the appearance of the socialist parties in some cases. France, Italy, Greece, of course, Spain are some examples. Portugal, of course, particularly in the south. These parties contributed, the rise of these parties contributed a lot to the communist fall. And here we can see it's clear if I think in my mind, according to me, why the socialists managed to attract much more electorate, much more voters coming from the communist world. And the answer is quite simple here, because those parties could combine at the same time realism and radicalism. Socialist parties in the early 80s were considered very neighbors of the communists. So for many of the old communist electorate base to vote for the socialists, it was quite similar. It was a anti-right-wing vote, we can say, something that went to the same direction, of course, without the same radicalism, without the same ideological threats, but at least it was, we could say, a progress, something that contributed to the win of the progressive forces. We have also some examples that show that how happened, and the socialists were able to gain votes from the communist electorate. And this example is also, it's again the French example. In 1974, in 1978, the French socialists with the communists created a common front, a common electoral front, and this front was able for them later in 80, 81, 82 to contribute to their electoral rise. And finally, the organizational factor. The organizational factor, it could be also presented as a cultural factor. I mean, it's easy to enter this factor in the cultural factor discussion debate about the decline of the communist. I mean that the organizational model of the communist is considered by many as a factor, passé dated, something that was not modern and could not express the new needs, the new style of life, and generally the new values and sensitivities born after 68. And for many people, this is a good question and open debate. For many people, the May 68 is considered a very important factor that contributed to this organizational decline of the Communist Party, because May 68 was a different form, organizationally speaking, of radicalism, of expression of radicalism, and the communists were not able to integrate, to incorporate this radicalism in the traditional form that they still insisted on. And of course, last but not least, the erosion of the USSR image in European public opinion. And now it's the opposite. In 45, due to the victory against fascism and the role, the great contribution of the Soviet Union in this, European communists were able to gain from the situation. Now it's exactly the opposite. The negative image of Soviet Union because of Afghanistan, the crisis in Poland, what was happening in 68, the Soviet invasion in Czechoslovakia. All these events were creating a negative image, and of course the communists were in a very difficult situation to present themselves as a kind of they apologized from Soviet Union, and it is interesting. We don't have time to discuss about Eurocommunism as a trend as a communist trend trying to take distances from the Soviet Union, because after 68 Soviet Union was exactly considered as a negative factor upon the communist parties in Europe. But even Eurocommunism was not able to stop this electoral decline. So when we arrive in 89, 91, we communists everywhere saw the fall of Soviet Union, the fall of Berlin's Wall, and they had three different options. We could say they had to choose three different strategies. I call the strategies, according to Albert Hirschman, exit, voice, and loyalty. Exit was the strategy to decide to transform the party into a non-communist party, to become something other, a radical transformation. Voice means reviewing critically the past, self-criticism, keeping the communist identity, the core at least, but with many criticism against towards the past, the Soviet past. And loyalty is the third strategy, which means to remain faithful to Marxism, Leninism, and of course the Soviet legacy from Lenin to Brezhnev. And here you could see the different choices, the different paths adopted by European communists. The exit case is on the left, in the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, PC, which became Democratic Party of the left in the beginning, and later on, again, a new change, Democratic Party in Denmark, and the party, the PSUK in Catalonia. Voice, French-Spain party, Rifondazione Comunista, split from the PC and the party in Belgium, and loyalty, of course, UPE, the Portuguese party, and AKEL in Cyprus. Okay, and here you can, in this table, you can see the ideological and political orientations that this term exit, voice, and loyalties in reality mean. And some parties decided to remain loyal to the Marxist-Leninist orthodoxy. These three parties, the Communist Foundation, which concern France, Spain, Belgium, Italy, transformation to social democracy. Here we have the Italian case and the Finnish case, and transformation into a red-green new left, which is the case that we discussed today, and is this concerning four parties, which became Syriza, of course, not immediately, because after Kukuesteriku it was Synaspismos, and after Synaspismos we saw Syriza, the VKP in Sweden, in Denmark, and in Catalonia. And here you have, you can see what happened to those parties who decided to keep their communist name and their communist identity. In general, we see an electoral decline, with the exception of the Greek one. The Greek party is an exception for many reasons in general. One of these reasons is electoral, I can say, stability, resistance to what we see everywhere. And probably this is a good, if you like, a good point for discussion, why this happened with the Greek party and not with other parties. But as you can see, in the majority of the cases, the decision to keep the communist identity as such in the name of the party is a bad decision, electorally speaking. I mean, it gives no electoral gains. The most tragic story is, of course, the French story, because the French party was the first party after the end of World War in the French political system, and became in 2022, in the last election, a significant party, 2% of the electorate. More or less, this is the same story. Speaking about the Portuguese party, the Spanish party decided a few years ago to enter to a coalition with Podemos, and now in the last elections with Sumar. So it's a different case, but the party is keeping its communist identity as a communist party, I mean, in the name. I don't have time. In the beginning, I have great ambitions, but I understand that there is a pressure. So I skip it, but this is what happened in Eastern Europe, which is not insignificant. It's important. What happened to all these parties, the communist parties, I mean, of the communist regimes. So all these parties decided, not all, but the majority of these parties decided to become socialists, social democrats. There are two exceptions. The most important is the Czech one, the Communist Party of Czech Republic. This party is remaining communist. Of course, now the party is meeting serious electoral organizational problem, and the other party is the Slovak Communist Party, is minor, insignificant electorally, and political parties. Now it's here you can see a table with the electoral evolution of these parties. I don't insist on this because I would like at least to introduce what happened after 1990s relating to the rise of what we call the new radical left. So what happened after the 90s? It's clear that there is a moment that is considered as the critical moment for the appearance, the rise of this radical left entities related with the financial crisis of 2008. So this is the moment that we could say that is related closely to the rise, to the appearance of these radical parties. And here you can see these parties. Some cases there is a lot of debate. It's clear. I remember I talked with Italian colleagues, and they told me Movimento 5 Star is a radical left parties. It's not a radical left party. It is debatable, even it is a left parties. It's the same with Syriza. Is Syriza now a radical left party? Is Syriza a leftist party now? With Kasselakis in the post of chairman. In other cases, it's more clear in Spain with Podemos and Sumar, in France with Francis Insoumise, Belgium, which is very important party in a very interesting party to discuss is the case of the Workers' Party in Belgium. It's a very radical party coming from Trotskyist political environments during the 80s. The Bloco Party, left bloc in Portugal, and the Linke also is a question. Is Linke a new radical leftist party, or is an old communist party and post-communist party? And so there is a huge debate here. In the right, you can see the percentage of these parties. What is very interesting, on the contrary, comparing those parties with the old communist parties, those radical parties are in government. Are parties that form coalitions of governments in different countries. They don't afraid to be in government, which is very very interesting. I had in mind to talk about Syriza. I don't talk about Syriza. I know we can discuss it later. What is interesting about this part, and I'm going to the end of my presentation. Delvit says that they constitute a blend of all the new elements. And I think that this is the most important characteristic. They contain at the same time reformist and revolutionaries or radical characteristics. And they have an old agenda and a new agenda. Old agenda, I mean all the materialist issues that the old communist parties, but not all, only the communist parties, the left supported during 20th century, during 19th century socialist movement, talking about working class, salaries, unemployment, all these materialist issues, but at the same time they put in the agenda new issues, environmental issues, LGBTQ issues, or other post-materialist issues, which constitute very, very new things in the political arena. And the second thing, which is also important, is that they given an image that they overcome the split of the Second International between reformists and revolutionaries. At the same time, these parties are reformistic and revolutionary. Of course, communists who critics of parties, they say they are opportunists in reality. They are not radicalists, they are not revolutionaries, they are all only reformists. But it's an open debate, we could discuss it. And finally, organizationally speaking, it's true that on this field we see a new situation. Those parties overcome the strict organizational structures of the old communist parties. They present, I can say, more flexible organizational structures in some cases, like the Syriza that I know very well. They don't have structures at all, if you like. So the final question, which I cannot answer, but I think it's the moment to put it. It's put this new radical leftist party replace the Communist Party family in Europe and be the main expression of the left in the years that come. The answer is too early to say. Thank you very much. Perfect.
Excellent. We have 35 minutes for questions. So as I said, if you could a brief introduction and then the question, that would be appreciated.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Professor here. I think the idea that you were broaching that we may have reached a point where the Marxist inheritance has sort of been overcome is really interesting. I wonder whether, in some sense, what that means is that the Soviet legacy has also been overcome. That it's possible to have a radical party in Europe that is not in some way tainted by association with the Soviet Union. And as a related matter, we've also seen the rise of far-right parties, or at least, let's say, very hard-right parties that seem to have kind of a parallel relationship with their fascist parties of the past. They no longer seem to be tracing their genealogy directly to them, even though one can say that they have some elements of their ideology. Do you think that is a fair parallel to draw?
What is this?
Whatever you prefer. Do you want to collect a couple of questions?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Oh, hi. I'm Brian. I'm a retired school teacher. Here in Canada, it looks like they've been successful at creating a daycare program for children that'll be under $10, which is something probably Europeans have enjoyed for probably 50 years. And it looks like there may be dental plans for the poorest of the population, which hasn't been done in the past. Have these new left parties delivered like some new bread and butter benefits for workers in Europe and certain countries? They've been successful with new social programs.
Still collecting? Okay. Hi, Tom Pavone. I'm an assistant professor here in political science. I have two questions. So first, one of your hypotheses is that what contributed to the Communist Party's electoral decline is the rise of socialist parties, but there's a new article in the American Political Science Review called The Rise and Fall of Social Democracy that shows pretty convincingly that in this very same time period that you're tracing a collapse of the Communist parties, on average, there's some exceptions like France, socialist parties are also in a longue durée kind of decline. And so I'm wondering if their fates aren't more joined at the hip rather than substitutes than you might think. And then the last question is, I mean, it was easier, I think, before the end of the Cold War to figure out what it meant to be a left party. But I really think this definitional issue is really important once you get parties like Syriza or the Five Star Movement or France Insoumise. So how would you figure out that a party is a radical left party today, particularly given some of these weird, uneasy alliances that sometimes